It's time for the Kim Hammer Show, where you'll learn how your state government affects you, your family, and community. Here's Kim Hammer.
Good afternoon. Hope you're having a great Saturday afternoon, and thank you for joining us on the Kim Hammer Show. I think we're going to have a good show today, especially given the events of the week, and our guest, who's going to be Sean Parnell with Save Our States, to talk about the national vote, but also to talk about the Electoral College process, and he's going to enlighten us on that. So I think with the events of the week, it's going to be very timely. Just want to say thanks to those that helped make this show possible, which would be Baxley Phillips Mounty Real Estate, Saline County. They take care of all your Central Arkansas real estate needs, whether you're in Saline County or Central Arkansas, it matters not. They can take care of your residential, commercial, and if you have rental property, they can take care of you both on the residential and on the rental side as well. Got some great commercial listings. If you're looking to make an investment, got a place you want to locate a business, they can take care of you down at Baxley Phillips Mounty Real Estate, located in Saline County. Also, Edward Food Stores throughout Central Arkansas and over in East Arkansas, both Edwards Food Store and Edwards Cash Savers. I was actually in the Edwards store over in Bryant today and got some really good savings, I might add. They got a great sale going on, so you might go around to the Edward Food Stores, and I think you'll find a clean environment, friendly staff. They now, in some of the stores, have their own self-checkout, so if you like to do that, you can, or they'll check it out for you either way. You can order online. They'll have it ready for you to pick up. So they got all the conveniences, and they've got it in a great, accessible environment. Just want to remind you that next week I've already got State Representative Julie Mayberry, who's going to come on the show and going to talk about No Patient Left Alone bill. I know we've got another one out there, so we're going to try to make that a topic of discussion on next week's show. If any of you have had family members that are in nursing homes or maybe in hospitals and have had to stay alone during their stay, you can understand the sensitivity to this subject. And Julie has a bill that she's going to present entitled No Patient Left Alone that will help address that issue. I want to remind you, too, that if you want to follow, we start the legislative session tomorrow. And we will start at noon with the assembly of the House of Representatives and the Senate at noon at the Capitol tomorrow. There are going to be some, they're not restrictions, they're just safeguards that are being put in place as far as making sure that we maintain a safe environment, not only for the legislature, but for the administrative branch and also for the public that will be moving in and out of the building. So just be mindful of that. If you want to get some good up-to-date information, you can go to the Arkansas State Legislature website. You find that by going to www.arcleg.state.ar.us. That is www.arcleg.state.ar.us. It'll pull up the website. You can also track the bills that are being filed, of which there are several bills that have already been pre-filed. And as they are filed daily, you can go up to that website and actually track where the bills are and read the bills in their entirety. And one of the things I intend to do for the next few months is to bring in some legislators to talk about their bills and some of what their intent is, and just give them opportunity, a platform to kind of share publicly what they're trying to do with their bills. With all that being said, let's move on to the subject matter of the day, which is Electoral College. And again, I've got Sean Parnell on with Save Our States. And Sean, thank you for taking time out on a Saturday to join us on the Kim Hammer Show.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for having me on.
I'll tell you what, let's start off by just giving people a little bit of a comfort level about who Sean Parnell is and what qualifies you to be an expert to talk on the subject matter, and talk a little bit about Save Our States. And if you want to go ahead and share your website, people can be looking it up and just follow along if they want to.
Sure, I'll go ahead and give the website first so I don't forget it at the end. It's saveourstates.com. Save Our States is an organization that is focused on defending and preserving the Electoral College, specifically the state-by-state election process, where in our federal system, it is the states that elect the president as states, of course, with each state's votes being weighted by their population, plus, of course, the 2 votes for the senators that each state has. As far as being an expert, I'll let other people kind of figure out whether I am or am not. I'll just say that I've been working on these and related issues for more than a decade, and have spent a fair amount of time over the last several years talking with state legislators, talking with historians and policymakers, and really trying to make sure I understand and I'm able to communicate with people on why the Electoral College is so important and why the proposed change to it, something called the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, is just a really terrible idea and is not something that anybody who favors federalism, who favors having states as more than mere administrative subunits of the national government, is not something, the National Popular Vote is not something that we should be endorsing or embracing.
So take us back to Electoral College 101 and tell us the history of where it came into our nation and what brought it about and the necessity for it at the time that it was brought about.
Sure. Of course, it all goes back to the Constitutional Convention and the events leading up to it. At that time, we had the Congress of the Confederation, and in the Continental Congress, and then the was a system where there was no executive branch, there was no president for all intents and purposes, and they each state had one vote in the Congress. It didn't matter how many delegates they sent to the Congress. Each state still only had one vote, and so if you had, 3 members of Congress from, let's say, New York, then when it came time for 3 would get together, and majority wins, and they would cast their one vote the way a majority of the members of Congress wanted to. This was a terribly inefficient system. There were all sorts of problems with it. The lack of executive branch. Had to do was have a strong executive, but they also knew that they had, or a number of them knew, that they had to have a executive who was independent of Congress. For most of the Constitutional Convention, the plan was to have Congress appoint the president, sort of a parliamentary type of a system. However, were very unhappy with that. They felt that it would make the president a creature of Congress, that the president would not be independent, would not be able to serve as a check on congressional power. So the idea of using electors to select the president came up very early in the convention, and at one point in the middle of the convention, there was about a 4 or 5 day period where they actually replaced congressional appointment of the president with sort of an early version of the Electoral College. There were some problems with sort of how they did the math on how many votes each state got in that early plan. So they yanked that out. They put back in congressional appointment of the president. But then by the end, most people were still unhappy with the idea of having Congress appoint the president. So it got referred to what was called the Committee of 11. I think there were actually several committees of 11 dealing with separate issues. Only 11 states had representatives at the Constitutional Convention at this point. And anyway, this Committee of 11 came back and said, okay, we're going to do an electoral college. Each state gets, as many votes as they have members of Congress, and everybody, well, not North Carolina and South Carolina, but everybody else signed on to it and said, yep, that works for us. And that's basically how we got it. It was an effort to ensure that the president was independent of Congress.
As far as the moving forward from that point till now, mm-hmm. What is the rationale behind the national popular vote, and why would anybody want that, or what would be the motive for somebody wanting that as opposed to the Electoral College?
Right. So the general rationale, as near as I can tell, and obviously it's not one I support, but general rationale is this idea that the president is supposed to be, the one office holder in the country that we all vote for. I don't vote for senators in Arkansas. You don't vote for, my member of Congress here in Virginia. But the president is somehow supposed to be above all of this And so, gee, we should all vote for it and not have this sort of two-step process that we have now. One of the slogans that they like to talk about also is, the idea of one person, one vote, which they see the Electoral College is kind of violating. I'm not sure I totally agree. Well, no, I definitely don't really agree with that. But one of the points that I've been making is that, one person, one vote is indeed a very, very important principle in a democratic country. However, it's not the only important principle. Checks and balances, federalism, separation of powers. These are other things that are also very important, and the Electoral College is an integral part of.
And if you want to call in and ask a question, you can call into 501-823-0965, 501-823-0965. Talk about the process to override. That was, kind of the topic of the week. As you look back over the week and see the events that occurred, the efforts to try to set aside the votes or to redirect the votes. Can you talk about that? And was that a failed attempt from the beginning? Because on the House side, at least, they held the total number of Democrats. Maybe perhaps they lived in the hopes that some would cross the line. Or can you just kind of expound a little bit about the events of the week and how does that fit in procedurally what was trying to be done?
Sure. And it's one of those things that it gets really complicated and nuanced in some areas. And so I'll try not to get too deep into the weeds. But basically, the way federal law is written, and this comes out of the 1876 election and then the Electoral Count Act that Congress passed in 1887. But the way it works is, of course, each state holds its own election for its own electors, and then each state is within it responsible for certifying who the slate of electors are who get to cast the electoral votes for that state. And then, of course, those electors go and actually, vote for their candidates for president. Those documents are then transmitted to to Congress, and Congress then opens and counts them in public. That's sort of the general process. Congress, for the most part, doesn't really have much authority to overturn any of the ballots. I mean, obviously there is a challenge process, and that was what some were attempting to do. But my take on that was that for a variety of reasons, those were sort of doomed to failure once the state of Georgia, once the state of Kansas, once the state of Alaska, once the state of California has certified which slate of electors they are having vote on their state's behalf. And then once those electors cast their votes, it is an incredibly high bar that has to be crossed in order to, try and get that reversed. Most of what the lawsuits and the various things that were, being attempted had very little chance of succeeding. In many cases, I would say no chance. And then, obviously just the politics of it in the Congress meant that there was really no chance that Congress was going to say that, Georgia's electoral votes can't be counted or Pennsylvania's votes can't be counted. That's just sort of not really part of the process unless there are, really significant, obvious, and fairly, easily provable or certainly just provable cases that you can show that a particular election was so badly handled and there was so much rampant fraud that, there's legitimate questions about whether or not that election was valid or not.
Did you follow? Before I ask you that next question, let me ask you this. As far, there was a lot of talk about the vice president, his role in the Electoral College and what he had the authority to do or not do. Talk about what the vice president's responsibility is in the electoral process.
So the vice president's responsibility is basically the same as somebody at, say, the Academy Awards who opens the envelope and announces, who won Best Picture or Best Actress or whatever. It is the vice president presides over the Senate, but the vice president does not have the authority to, decide which votes get counted or how they get counted. His job is to announce what the certificates that are pulled out of the envelopes say. He can't say that, he can't refuse to read what's on the certificate. He can't announce the wrong, results. He can't say, this is an invalid certificate. Those are all not within his power. The Electoral Count Act lays out a process in which votes can, in fact, be challenged, but the vice president doesn't have any more role in that other than recognizing, Senator Ted Cruz, who wishes to stand up and, challenge the results of Georgia or Arizona or whatever. That's pretty much his sole function.
So talk about the one senator has to object, one member of the House has to object. Talk about that part of it.
Sure. So the way it works is you have to have both a member of the House and a member of the Senate submit a written objection that they then sign saying, we wish to challenge Arizona's electoral votes. And then each chamber, because it's a joint session of Congress, both the House and the Senate meet in the same chamber, although with COVID, I honestly can't say how they necessarily managed all of that. But anyways, when an objection is, meets the standard of one senator, one representative, then each chamber goes to their, they separate the House debates, the Senate debates. There's a maximum of 2 hours that any one state can be debated, and then they vote. And the vote is to accept or reject a particular state's electoral votes. And the way it works is it takes both chambers in order to reject electoral votes from a state. The default position is, the presumption is, these are valid electoral votes, but if both chambers vote to reject a particular state's electoral votes, then those votes are set aside. One of the things to understand is that if, let's say that the vote to reject Arizona's electors had won in both the House and the Senate, that does not then give the other candidate those electoral votes. It means that no votes at all are counted from that state.
And is that where they get sent back to the state for the state to decide whether it's be, a new election? Nope. Or what happens Nope. at that point?
What happens at that point is that state's votes are not counted. That's it. That's the end of the process. There is no, send it back to the state legislature to appoint new electors or anything. That doesn't happen. What happens is the state simply loses its electoral votes. There's no redo. There's no do-over. They lose their electoral votes. That's it.
So would that have been the strategy from the beginning, is not so much to get it back to the state as much as it is to take them off the side of Biden, so that Trump would have won by the fact that those votes, those Electoral College votes, would not have been counted into Biden's column?
Well, so I will say that it appears that that was an element of the strategy, that they simply not show up in Biden's column. That there is some question about, there's lots of questions, to be honest, but there is some question about, because in order to be elected president, you have to win a majority of electors appointed. And so the question then becomes, and I apologize, I'm probably about to get too deep into the weeds here.
We got time. Go in the weeds.
So, there's 538 electors. It takes 270 to elect the president. That's assuming every state's electors are, recognized as being appointed and so forth, sort of, normal situation. However, if a state's electors are rejected, let's say it was Arizona, which I'm going from memory here, but I think they have 11 electoral votes. So the question then becomes, okay, so if Arizona's electors are rejected by both chambers, so Arizona has no vote, then does the number it takes to be elected president then drop? So if you take if you take 538, subtract 11, okay, so now you need, do you need half of, doing the math in my head here, but 527, do you need half of that, or do you still need 270 of the original 538? Nobody actually knows the question, the answer to this particular question, because of course this has never come up before. But these are the sorts of questions that where we get into real murky territory, and so it's hard to say what exactly happens. There's one scenario in which the Congress rules that the electors were properly appointed, which means you still need 270. And there's another scenario in which it says, okay, these electors were not properly appointed, so they don't count towards the denominator, and so you only need, 265, I think, is the number that you would need if Arizona's 11 were taken out of the equation. And it's just, at this point, it's unknown and frankly kind of unknowable how that shakes out.
Is it by the fact that there are unknown variables, such as like what you're talking about right now, an argument as to why people think we ought to go to the national popular vote, because it would be just real clean and simple? Set aside the fact that with mail-in ballots and all the, fraudulent activity, whether that plays out in court to be deemed true or whether it's going to be conspiracy, I think there's evidence to show that there was fraud. To what level, maybe we don't know, and hopefully somebody's investigating that to determine exactly how much that, amounted to. But outside of that, is that part of why people are pushing for the national popular vote, is because of some of the unknown factors associated with the Electoral College process?
It would not surprise me if for some people that's what they're talking about, what is sort of in their minds. But as you alluded to, and it's not just allegations of fraud, there's lots of other serious problems with the National Popular Vote Compact. In terms of it just is not a simple thing the way advocates of national popular vote often portray it. It's not a simple thing to get a clear and simple answer to who won under national popular vote. One example I can just cite right now is that we still don't actually know who won the popular vote in 1960. Basically not having anything to do with supposed fraud, but just because Alabama did something kind of weird with the way they elected their presidential electors, and it doesn't really fit neatly into the type of system that national popular vote needs in order to determine who the winner is accurately. There's one interpretation of Alabama's popular vote that gives, John F. Kennedy a 113,000 popular vote lead. That's the one I think most people are kind of familiar with. But there's another interpretation that is, I'll just go with equally plausible and not obviously incorrect, that gives Richard Nixon a 60,000 vote national popular vote lead based on, if you use this other method of allocating Alabama's popular vote. This is kind of a historical, triviality at this point. Doesn't really matter because Kennedy won the Electoral College by a significant margin. But under national popular vote, under what's being proposed, not being able to cleanly and fairly point and say, okay, this is clearly the person who won the presidency, that's a really big problem. All
right. Tell you what, I'm going to have to take a break, but when we come back, here's some of the things I want to talk about. And if you want to call in and ask a question, you can call into 501-823-8255. 501-823-0965 here on the Kim Hammer Show. Here are some of the things I'm going to want to ask you about when we come back. First of all, what should states be doing in order to help secure the Electoral College through their legislative process? What do we need to have in place that would help secure that, if anything at all, and what can we do as legislators? The second thing I want to talk about is mail-in ballots, as far as how it adversely could affect the national popular vote, as you're referring to it. And then the third thing is, what are the down in the weeds as far as what the national popular vote is structured to be? What does it look like, and what are the potential downfalls that could be associated with that? We'll talk about that and others when we come back on the Kim Hammer Show. You're listening to Sean Parnell, who is associated with Save Our States. If you want to get caught up to speed on their website, you go to www.saveourstates.com and follow along on their website. And we'll be back here in just a little bit on the Kim Hammer Show after these breaks. I want to say thank you to the folks that helped make this possible, which is Baxley Phillips Mowdy Real Estate in Central Arkansas and Edwards Food Store here in Central Arkansas and over in East Arkansas. We'll be back to the Kim Hammer Show in just a few minutes.
Wow, 2021 is finally here. For many, it couldn't come soon enough. Another health insurance open enrollment has come and gone, but it's not too late to get a personalized health plan that works best for your situation. Pat Davis, yourhealthplanman.com, offers plans all year long. If you're not locked into a plan through your work, you can look at how he can save you up to 50% or more on your premiums. And you'll love this. His plans actually pay you when you go to the doctor. You have nothing to lose but a few minutes for a valuable brief phone call to see how they can help you. One of the things Pat's clients appreciate most is that they're not paying for stuff they don't want or need. It's truly a personalized health plan. Pat has a growing team and would like to officially welcome his son-in-law, Corey Townsend, to yourhealthplanman.com. He and his team would love to help find the best plan for you. Go to yourhealthplanman.com and see what they can do for you. Call or text 501-605-6935. That's yourhealthplanman.com.
Charlie Kirk sees a revenge tour coming.
The Democrats are now going to use this to loop almost all conservative activity under a terrorism statute. They are going to try and impeach and remove a president that very well might be able to run again. They are now going on a revenge campaign against every single person that was ever involved with President Donald Trump.
The Charlie Kirk Show. Weeknights at 10 on 101.1 FM. The Answer. Sean Hannity, The Sean Hannity Show.
You're loving Democrats like James Clyburn. They're actually urging Biden to establish an independent commission that would assign blame for people that died from the pandemic. And they want to put the blame, where do you think? On Donald Trump. That's how sick it has gotten. When you think it can't even get sicker, it does.
The Sean Hannity Show. Afternoons at 2, right before Jay Sekulow at 5 on 101.1 FM. The Answer.
Hi, my name is Ryan Bourne.
And I'm Danica Bourne.
And we're the owners of South Coast Tax.
As we enter 2021, we are filled with hope for what is to come and gratitude for what has already passed.
With our Lord by our side, this year will be filled with joy, love, happiness, and success. Let's not allow 2020 to define who we are. Let's tackle 2021 head on and get rid of the taxes today.
South Coast Tax are Christian-based tax accountants and attorneys who specialize in releasing bank levies, wage garnishments, and filing complex tax returns. We are the leaders in acceptance of offers and compromise with awesome results.
We are also a small firm who will treat you like family and not just a number.
Call us today at 1-800-TAX-1176 for a free consultation, and we'll take the time to explain all of the programs that you qualify for in order to allow you a fresh start.
Call us at 1-800-TAX-1176, and together we can help achieve this goal to finish what God has started and put the IRS debt behind you for good. Again, that number is 1-800-TAX-1176.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to the Kim Hammer Show. Glad that you're listening today. Just a couple quick things I want to make you aware of. Next week on the Kim Hammer Show, one of the guests will be Julie Mayberry, State Representative, who has a bill that she has filed called No Patient Left Alone. There are a couple other efforts out there. We may combine them all into one. But if you have a family member that has been in the hospital and you've not been able to go up and be with them, or you have a loved one that's in the nursing home and you've not been able to go in and to see them, that's going to be the subject matter of Julie's bill, and we're going to have her on to talk about what her proposal is through her legislation, and that'll be next week on the Kim Hammer Show here on 101.1 FM. The Answer. Again, I want to thank those who helped make the show possible. Baxley Phillips Mighty Real Estate in Central Arkansas. Take care of all your real estate needs, residential or commercial, or if you got property you want to rent or you're looking to rent property, they're a good source for you to go to. Then Edwards Food Store here in Central Arkansas and also over in East Arkansas. Appreciate these guys helping make this show possible. We have on the Kim Hammer Show today the Sean Parnell, who is with Save Our States. If you want to get up on their website, it's www.saveourstates.com. Also, you can find some information on my website, which is www.thekimhammershow.com. We have some information up there as well. And if you want to call in and ask Sean a question, you can call in to 501-823-0965. So, Sean, when we left before the break, I gave you kind of three areas that we were going to talk about. And let's start off by talking about the national popular vote. What are some of the down in the dirty details as far as what you find when you get into it, and what are some of the adverse effects that it could have if they are successful getting through?
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and describe the compact very briefly. Basically, states that join the compact pledge that rather than having their electors be chosen by the people of that state, they will instead defer to whoever is deemed to have received the most votes nationally. So let's go with 2020, memory serves correct, Arkansas voted for Donald Trump. If Arkansas were a member of the National Popular Vote Compact, and it was in effect, then your votes, your electoral votes, would have gone to Joe Biden, assuming the vote count totals, stayed the same or roughly the same under a different system. And it is supposed to go into effect when states that have a total of 270 or more electoral votes have joined. Right now, they're at about 196 votes. And so that puts them about 3/4 of the way towards effectively abolishing the Electoral College, but actually keeping the framework, the sort of the mechanics of the Electoral College, but just completely twisting it so no longer do your electors represent your state and the voters who put them there. Instead, they represent sort of the national will, so to speak. In terms of, what you find when you start looking into it at the details, I mean, obviously there's this, from my perspective at least, this is a really bad compact because it undoes one of the key checks and balances that the founding fathers put into the Constitution. But sort of once you get beyond that pretty substantial objection, if you just start actually looking at the details of how it would operate, what you find are some really very troubling things that essentially make it very easy for it to result in an electoral crisis is the term that I frequently use, because there are a number of things about the compact that just make it prone to catastrophic failure. Most interstate compacts, and interstate compacts are a very common thing, but they rely on member states and member states alone to execute, to go into effect, to work. The National Popular Vote Compact, on the other hand, relies on non-member states to uniformly and accurately and in a timely manner report their vote counts. It requires non-member states for it to work. And the problem is that non-member states aren't required to participate. They're not required to cooperate. And states sometimes do some kind of strange things, or at least things that some people think are strange, that simply make it impossible to accurately determine who won the popular vote. I mentioned Alabama in 1960. What they did was they allowed people to vote for individual electors, and the Democratic slate of electors, only 5 of the 11 were pledged to John Kennedy. 6 of the 11 were unpledged and actually wound up voting for Senator Harry Byrd of Virginia when they cast their electoral votes. Now, I don't necessarily expect that scenario to arise again under NPV, but there's something out there called ranked choice voting. And I can get into the weeds if you really want, but basically the problem with ranked choice voting under national popular vote is that you have the potential for states to be reporting multiple numbers for the same candidate. In Maine in 2016, depending on whether a state reports initial numbers or final numbers after the ranked choice voting process has been completed, you had a 55,000 vote difference. And under NPV, there's no obvious way to determine which of those sets of numbers can be used. But the bigger danger is if we ever have a serious third party or independent candidate, and we seem to have those about every 20, 25 years in this country in terms of presidential elections, if you ever have a serious third party or independent candidate who finishes ahead of one of the two major party candidates, then what you will wind up with is hundreds of thousands or potentially even millions of votes being erased from one of the two major party candidates. That seems like a real problem. If, a third of the people in, let's say Illinois go to the polling station and they vote for the Democrat, but that candidate winds up finishing behind the other two candidates, then when Illinois reports its vote totals, then there's a possibility that instead of saying, 1.5 million votes in Illinois for the Democratic candidate, it says 0. I mean, you can literally erase millions of votes simply by using the ranked choice voting method. Now, this is not to bash ranked choice voting. This is just to say that states that do these sorts of things, which they're perfectly free to do, is simply incompatible with the mechanism that national popular vote, thinks exists. And, if you think we have a bad situation now, wait until literally millions of votes are being literally erased from some candidates' vote totals under national popular vote. That's not something that I look forward to.
Is that the same thing along the line, or is that the same thought process behind what we call jungle primary? Are those two things closely related, or is that what you were describing?
So jungle primary, and there's a couple of different definitions of that term, I think, but if you reallocate, like if no candidate receives a majority the first time around, and you then start, taking the second place votes or second preference of the lowest candidate and transferring them to their second choice, which I think in jungle primaries is something that can be done. I think it's maybe kind of similar or raises some of the
same concerns
issues with it. Yeah, same concerns. And again, I'm not trying to pick on ranked choice voting. I actually kind of like the idea, but it's not compatible with national popular vote, and you are literally going to be erasing hundreds of thousands or millions of votes from one of the two major party candidates. And, that's going to be a problem, I think.
I think that would be a huge problem. And an example of what we've dealt with this week would just be accelerated, because when you take away a person's vote, you are robbing them of their choice and disenfranchising them. And I think that's what's at the center of the controversy that we're dealing with right now. And I don't know that you particularly want to answer this, but with regards to all the accusations that have gone on this election cycle and people's votes being disenfranchised, because of the mail-in process and the potential fraud that's associated with it, whatever process we need to have in order to secure that is what we need to fight for. And when I say fight for, I want to make sure nobody misunderstands me. We don't need to get violent on this thing, but we do need to unify our voices and our efforts to make sure that anyone who would support anything moving away from the Electoral College is defeated. I did notice on your website, I think, that the Electoral College is actually part of the Republican platform, and the Democrat Party remains silent on it, which to be silent is to affirm or to agree with, in my opinion. But with regards to the compact and mail-in ballots and all this that's been going on, is there anything that supports in the compact the concept of mail-in ballots or using that as a means for people to vote?
Well, I mean, the compact is silent on it. I mean, the compact assumes, rightly, I mean, I think the compact is a terrible compact, but it gets a few things right in terms of its premises. It assumes that every state runs its own election process. And so if, Oregon, Washington, Colorado, Utah, Hawaii are the 5 states that have, more or less a universal mail-in system, under the compact and under, federalism, frankly, that's fine. And other states have, more restrictive mail-in ballots, and that's fine too. Each state gets to set its own standards for how they allow people to vote, how they count the votes, and those sorts of things. One of the problems, though, is that, right now, if things get the Pennsylvania allows people to vote by mail in this one particular way, and Arkansas does something different. That's okay because Pennsylvania has decided that this is how Pennsylvania does it. It doesn't affect your votes in Arkansas because you guys are doing what Arkansas is doing. But under national popular vote, obviously, it does actually start to make a really big difference in terms of who wins, what's going on in other states. And you wind up with a case where, the courts wind up having to get involved to settle equal protection claims or to decide whether or not they have to abide by in Arkansas. Does Arkansas have to follow Pennsylvania's, vote by mail standards because now that they're a member of the compact, that this is all one big voter pool, and so everybody has to be treated equally. I mean, these are the sorts of questions that, right now don't matter because Pennsylvania does what Pennsylvania does and Arkansas does what Arkansas does. Under NPV, you raise the specter of people in other states having the standing to go and say, well, hey, I live in Pennsylvania, but I don't really think that what they're doing in Arkansas is right, and I want a federal judge to change the law in Arkansas or whatever. Those are the sorts of issues that you start to run into when you have a national compact in which states agree to treat the entire nation as a single electorate rather than what we have now, which is 51 electorates, 50 states plus Washington, D.C.
I guess go back and revisit something. Maybe I'm just a little slow at the moment, but you mentioned about the Pennsylvania, Arkansas, and it doesn't really matter what they do. But if in Pennsylvania they are using a system that is ripe for fraud because, the mail-in ballot process and some of the things that we have, gotten reports on, and as a result of it, those total number of Electoral College votes goes to, in this case, Biden, and the total number of votes in Arkansas goes to Trump. How is that not disenfranchising the voters of Arkansas because the laws that are guiding the or regulating the election process up there have opened the door for excessive fraudulent activity?
Well, the short answer is federalism. I mean, when you're in Arkansas, you are voting for Arkansas's electors, just like people in Arkansas are voting for you when you run for office. And it really only concerns how Arkansas's representatives, Arkansas's electors, Arkansas's senators, governor, et cetera, it only concerns the people of Arkansas, how those people are elected. That's federalism. I mean, I think it's all good and well for people to, look at Pennsylvania and say, well, that doesn't really look great. But under our federal system, that is the way things, legally speaking, have to be looked at. If Pennsylvania wants to have a system that is not great, well, that is Pennsylvania's business in terms of how Pennsylvanians want to have their state representatives, their electors, their governor, their senator, et cetera, elected. That was actually what the lawsuit that
the Texas lawsuit
filed. Yeah, and the Supreme Court basically said well, said a couple of things, but one of which was there's no legitimate interest here. Texas does not have standing. Texas does not have, a case to be made complaining about how Pennsylvania has decided to elect its electors.
So what can states do? What would you advise us as I've already had a couple legislators texting me saying, ask him, what do we need to be doing as legislators in the state of Arkansas in order to make sure that if we believe the Electoral College needs to be preserved, what actually can we do that is going to have an impact at the national level to stop anything that may be getting done by what is now a president who's going to raise $3 trillion in taxes over the next decade? Congratulations when that starts coming out of all your Democrat pockets or never Trumper pockets. And then what do we do that's really going to have any impact over a Congress that is all Democrat and a president that is now Democrat? Is there anything we can do to stop it, or what do we do?
Yeah, I think there are some things that can be done. One would be a simple resolution, a statement saying that Arkansas respects the Electoral College, and we in Arkansas expect our electors to vote the way the people of Arkansas vote. We don't want them looking outside of our state's borders to determine who gets to be our representatives to the selection of the president. Another thing that can be done is you can actually, and this may be more of a sort of civic education type of thing, but Arkansas does not at present, I don't believe, list the individual names of the electors. What you can actually do is simply change your ballot to have those individual names on there. You don't have to necessarily have people voting individually, for this Republican elector, but not that Republican elector. But simply listing the names of the electors, I think, may have the benefit of simply educating people that when we go to vote, we're not voting directly for Donald Trump or Joseph Biden. We're voting for electors. And a lot of people, I think, sort of lose sight of that. And simply having a very visible and literal reminder on their ballot of how this process works, I think might help to just educate people and remind them of how our federal system works. And then I think, some people in other states have talked about doing a constitutional amendment to the state constitution that would, again, clarify that only people in Arkansas are entitled to have their votes counted towards the election of, obviously every office in Arkansas, but specifically presidential elector. And so those are a couple of things you can do. You can also talk with your congressional delegation and, ask them to do similar things in terms of introducing a resolution in Congress affirming the Electoral College as the way we elect the president, not some mythical national popular vote scheme. So those are kind of the first things that I would suggest are worth looking at.
And not to throw a wet blanket, because there is a level of discouragement that exists among those that feel that, we've lost the presidency. But all the things that you just mentioned, how is that going to have a measurable impact if the majority of states don't feel the same way or don't go to those efforts? What is it that we can do that would prevent it from going over to the compact, over to the national popular vote? Or is there anything that we really can do?
Well, there's one thing that a number of other states have talked about doing is to direct their state attorney general to begin looking into lawsuits that can potentially be filed challenging national popular vote if and when it ever, crosses that 270 electoral vote threshold and looks like it's ready to go into effect. The constitutional arguments against national popular vote are, complex, but, fairly obvious in some regards. I mean, it clearly upends the framework of the Constitution. But just, getting ready to file litigation against national popular vote, and directing your AG to be prepared for that. That would actually be a fairly substantial contribution, especially if depending on what sort of research they're able to pull together. Having your state AG actually make public that information, again, to educate people on why this compact, at least in this one realm of constitutionality, why the compact is just a really terrible idea.
All right. Well, hopefully our Attorney General, Leslie Rutledge, is listening, and we can, along with the legislators that have been sending me messages, that's something that we can get started on, because I'd rather be proactive than wait till the moment and then have to play catch up or not be prepared. I do think that there is a strategy in place that is being worked to remove the Electoral College, and they're just being patient, using time and chipping away at a wall in order to bring it down. So I do think being proactive would be the best way to go. On how many states right now of the 200, I think maybe you mentioned this a while ago, do you know how many states right now have already done something that is leaning toward the compact, and how many of the total 538 electoral votes have already shifted in that direction?
Right. So there are a total of 15 states plus Washington, D.C. that have joined the compact, and the number is 196 electoral votes. I suspect that after congressional reapportionment that number might drop by 1 or 2 or maybe even 3, just because some of the states like New York that are in the compact are probably going to lose a congressional seat. But we have to wait until those numbers come out to see what happens. But yeah, that's where they're at right now. 15 states plus D.C. and 196 electoral votes. Now, one thing I did want to mention actually is that the National Popular Vote people have made a point of saying that they plan to go to Arkansas to try and get your state to join the compact. I assume that you're probably not going to be too eager to sign on to that. But one thing that, sort of apparently they're citing as a reason for thinking Arkansas might be a good, target for them is the fact that the Arkansas, I think it was the House back in 2009, actually did pass the National Popular Vote compact. It didn't make it through the Senate, or maybe I have it reversed. It passed the Senate and didn't make it through the House. But from their public statements, they seem to think that Arkansas is a state that they should be heading to. So it definitely is worth sort of being prepared to counter their arguments and let your colleagues know, the reality of national popular vote. Well,
I think I could say with all surety, come on, boys, we got a surprise for you when you get here. Because, as I said, legislators have been blowing up my phone, and so I don't think it'll be very successful when it gets here. And I appreciate having you on the show today, because it has sounded the warning that we do need to get prepared, for the enemy coming. I guess the last thing, and I really appreciate you taking time to be out on the show today. I know it's Saturday. You probably have family that you're denying your time with, so I appreciate you being on the show. Any last words? I got about 1 minute for you. Any last words?
Sure. I just want to say that the Electoral College is a vital component of our federal Constitution. It is one of the things that prevents Arkansas from being a subunit of the national government, where your governor is appointed by the president, and that is worth preserving. That is worth protecting. And national popular vote, they say a lot of things, but for the most part, once you start looking at what's behind the rhetoric, you see that it just doesn't hold up, and that what they are really promising to bring is a system in which Arkansas's voice is eliminated from the presidential selection process. And I think that would be a terrible, terrible mistake to move in the direction of turning the states into administrative subunits of the national government.
Sounds like socialism to me. All right, I've got 30 seconds. So we've been listening to Sean Parnell with Save Our States. Go up to my website, thekimhammershow.com. You can get more information linked in there, or their website is www.saveourstates.com. Sean, thank you. If you're keeping track of your college units, you get 3 hours today for sitting through this. And so we appreciate you being here. And for all those legislators that are sending me messages, somebody can take the lead on it. I got the appetite whet. One of you guys can take the lead on it. And we appreciate you being on the Kim Hammer Show today. Next week, Julie Mayberry. You got somebody in the nursing home or somebody in the hospital you haven't been able to go see because you've been prohibited. You want to listen to the show. Kim Hammer, thank you.
101.1 FM, The Answer. KDXE FM, Kamak Village, Little Rock. A Salem Media Group station. 101.1 FM, The Answer.